everyone. This is Pam Reese with Adventures in Aging. And again, I'm here with my really good friend,
Gary Vandenberg. Pam, it's great to be back again for another episode. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsor, Stride Light. Stride Light provides quality diabetic shoes, custom inserts, foot orthotics, AFOs, other lower extremity products for over 20 years. You know, let your doctor and podiatrist know about stridelight.net. Thank you, Stride Light. What's our topic today, Pam?
So, Gary, I have a question, and it's going to lead into our topic. Has anyone ever made you feel bad about something you did or you did not do?
Today? Or just
in life, yes. Maybe today.
Yes, in life, the guilt trip. In fact, what was interesting was about a week ago, I woke up out of a deep sleep and wrote down the words guilt trip. And I think that's where we're heading today, aren't we?
Yes. We are going to be talking about guilt trips.
Oh my gosh. And there are experts in this. This is not a normal way of, communicating with other people, but I think we're all guilty of being on both sides of that.
Oh,
it's like a manipulation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. In fact, Gary, guilt is a complex emotion, right? It's an emotion that we feel, and it stems not always from a bad thing, but maybe sometimes even from a good thing. Sometimes we learn something from feeling guilty, but I can tell you most of the time you feel really, really bad about it, especially if it's used as like a manipulation, right?
Right. Well, I think I think part of life is feeling a bit of guilt. I know I've traveled most of my career, as you have, and, not being home with kids and missing birthdays and sports, that's reality. It's just how is it used back at you later in life? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
How people remember these things.
So do your kids ever guilt trip you today?
Oh, yeah. That's a good example is one of my kids, which is fine. Every time we watch baseball on TV, has to remind me that, I wasn't around to play baseball with him very much. Oh, my
gosh.
And the sports. And it's just a reminder. But, there's guilt there. But then on the other side is just how does one use that? And he doesn't use it to say, because you weren't there, why don't you buy me ice cream? That's where the guilt tripping comes in is when people try to use it to get something out of you.
No,
right?
So true. And the thing about guilt trips is it tends to be in relationships, right? Whether it's romantic friendships, professional friendships, family relationships. But the reason why we feel guilty is because we care. We care either about that other person or we care about the situation. And therefore it creates that guilt, horrible feeling. If we didn't care and someone said something to us to try to make us feel guilty, we would blow that off. We would just go on about our day and not even think about it. But it's when we care.
I think, and that's probably one of the solutions we'll throw in here is the more objective you are and say, gosh, let's find a solution instead of your problem's my problem, right? And deal with that. I was thinking, though, when you think about where this all came from, the origins of guilt trip aren't that old. They're actually in the early 70s.
I was going to say, it wasn't even a thing that you talked about?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably happening throughout centuries, but it wasn't until like 1974 that, in the early 1970s that it became like part of, the dictionary and all those types of things. And actually in some of the psychology and some of those things. I guess before that, you just kind of felt bad, right?
So go ahead.
When you think about it, though, I wonder why people do it. Do you have any suggestions on why people, do this to each other, make them feel like they owe you something, right?
Yeah. So, you got to recognize where the guilt is coming from. And so sometimes it's a cultural type of element, particularly in family relationships. It can also come up when people see a relationship as unequal or they feel taken advantage of, or they've never learned how to communicate their needs, or jealousy.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking when you were saying that. So in college, I had a roommate.
Okay.
And I remember one time, I don't think I had any money. It was one of those kind of deals. And so he offered to buy me a pizza, right?
Yeah.
Let's have a pizza. I think I was indebted to that guy for the next 5 years.
Oh
Isn't
my
that funny?
gosh, yes.
How people can use it. Hey, it kept coming. Hey, Gary, do you remember when I bought you that pizza? Hey, can you help me with my schoolwork? Can you help me move? That pizza cost me a couple $100. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
paying them back. But it's the fact that he was there in my time of need and saved me.
And so
Isn't that fun?
you're for the rest of your life, you're paying him back.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, thank goodness we went different directions. But isn't that funny how that kind of looks?
Oh yeah.
But I know. But I think though sometimes it's the person themselves that they're making you feel guilty about something about themselves deep down. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And it can be used as a tool. I know, and sometimes like in a marriage or in a relationship, a friendship. So for instance, when someone says to you, I thought you said this, when you're thinking, no, I never said that. But yet now you start to feel that weird guilt emotion.
Right. And so, I think that for some reason that becomes part of our problem, doesn't it? When people do these types of things. I think sometimes people get frustrated, right? If you think about people watching other people's kids, I hear that all the time, don't you?
Yeah.
Hey, I've got to watch my grandkids. I've got to watch my neighbor's kids, whatever it is. It seems like a process that they're frustrated, the person that's doing this, and saying, hey, my problem is now your problem. You need to help me out. Right?
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to convey.
Well, talking about kids, we tend to guilt our kids when they're little and we don't even realize we're doing it, right? I mean, it goes
like what? Yeah, like what? Tell me an example of that one.
So, like when your kids are little and they, they're asking you for something, right? And you're not getting it, so they're throwing a tantrum, and you say, I work really hard to put a roof over our head, and I get you everything that you want at Christmas and your birthdays, and that frustration of a parent just starts coming out to try to guilt the child. Oh, I guess I shouldn't have asked for that toy. Right.
Oh yeah. Well, my father grew up during the Depression and was really in the Great Depression and, brought that up a lot. How's that sound?
Oh my gosh, Gary. So me too. My dad and your dad had to have been around the same age, and my dad truly had nothing.
Oh yeah. And I think for Christmas, if you got an apple or an orange, that was like a big deal.
Yes.
And somehow if I got anything more than an apple and orange, which we did.
Right.
That was like, something else. And then my mother, with that starving people in the world, she guilted every meal that we had to almost lick our plates clean because somebody else didn't have food.
So did you ever really feel guilty about that? I mean, do people really feel guilty? I mean, perhaps we should, but I don't know. Does that work? I
felt guilty. I licked my plate clean a
few
times.
Gosh. That is so funny. I wonder if people still say that to this day, with we're not supposed to overeat and all of that, all the new nutritional guidelines. I wonder if that one's even used anymore.
Oh my gosh. But you're right when it comes to, this whole guilting things, but it can backfire, right?
Yeah, it can backfire. So you can make someone feel guilty, or your intention is to be manipulative, but then they come back with a comment or a statement that puts you back in your place, right? It just backfired on you.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes, I think about, I've got loving sisters and brothers and all that, but sometimes they may bring up something, harp on it to the point where I do the opposite, the complete opposite.
Oh, yes.
That's what I'm saying, how if somebody's backfiring that, if you do that, it's a dangerous trip or it's a dangerous adventure you're on. Instead of being safer, I may go even more dangerous, jumping out of planes and doing things like that. If you think that I'm not going to be safe, going on a bike ride, well, guess what? I'm going to go jump out of an airplane.
Yeah.
That type of a thing.
So, what else is, in regards to that, Gary, is that you can completely feel trapped in these situations. You don't know how to respond, right? So take, for example, your coworker. So let's say your coworker takes more breaks than everyone else, goes hang out in the break room on their cell phones, and it's making you feel horrible, but they're the manager's best friend. So now you're uncomfortable calling them out, and now you go through kind of this weird internal guilt that you know this is happening, but you're afraid to say it to anybody.
Oh, and there's always, and it happens, especially we're in healthcare here. You have a single parent, got a little kid, and their whole life situation is now becoming my problem, right? It's not my problem that you're a single mom with a little kid, and we still have to get to work and do our jobs, right? And,
right.
It's all coming out as being, it's my fault that she's a single mom and she's got a kid and she can't come in to work at the right time. So,
well,
it's
it goes along with if the other person doesn't really care, you could try to guilt trip them all day, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I really do believe there's something to be said for there has to be some feeling connected to that other person, whether it's good or bad, in order for guilt tripping to work.
Oh, and sometimes even new people I've not met them before, and they tell me their horrible life story. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry that's happened to you, but I really, as you're saying, that's their problem, right?
Yeah.
And you can't, why is it now becoming my problem? I hardly know you. It's those types of things.
So maybe that just turns into anger.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who
knows?
My
gosh.
But maybe there's some pointers we can share with our listeners here about, how to deal with this. I know that you just brought about listening, emphatically. I think that's important, letting them, communicate, being a good listener. I found that just recently in some different situations of just letting people talk through something sometimes helps them, get to a point of validating, it is tough at times to deal with situations. And gosh, that really is tough. I understand that. I can relate to that.
That's taking that empathetic, sympathetic role. And sometimes someone might be feeling hurt, and so they use a guilt trip when they don't know any other way to deal with a problem, Right. And I don't know if that's in the negative, perpetual negative person category or what, but sometimes people do use that.
Yeah, well, you're good at asking questions. What questions do you think one would ask to try to open up people to talking more? Pam, any thoughts that come across on that?
So someone might resort to guilt when they don't know how to advocate, like I was just talking about, for themselves, and then ask you in a more direct way. So if you notice exaggerated body language or emotions or snide comments or remarks, other signs suggestive of guilt, use open-ended questions to encourage them to express themselves directly. So, for instance, just simply say, hey, what's going on? So I might say, if you were that way to me, Gary, I might just say, Gary, what's going on with you today?
Right. You look upset, right?
You look you're looking upset, Gary. Tell me how you feel, which would probably just make you madder.
Okay. I've had people say that. How do you feel? Okay. No, how do you really feel?
Yeah.
I'm doing kind of okay. No, how do you really feel? In fact, there's a form of all this that's like self-guilt trip. Do you know that?
Right. Tell me about that. What's that?
At some point, you convince yourself that you're guilty of something that you're not guilty of.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Somehow I was responsible for the Cleveland Browns to lose many times.
Oh my gosh.
Mind, just because I watched them on TV. If I hadn't watched them, they would have won.
You are so funny. That sounds like my son and my son-in-law, my daughter. In fact, my daughter as well. So same scenario. When they watch the Cleveland Browns, if they win, they have to wear the same shirts. They have to wear their hair the same way. They have to go to the same venue. And then if they lose, they feel guilty. What did I forget? What did I not do?
I felt that way that I was responsible for world peace or lack of world peace a few times. What in the world is that about?
Oh my gosh.
I don't even know what's going on.
I have never felt guilty about that. But I do sometimes feel guilt with my kids. Even now that they're older, they'll say to me, some sad memory or something I said that made them feel bad. And I say, oh, Mom, remember that time? And you said, and I swear, Gary, sometimes I can't remember at all what they're saying, but just by the way they're speaking to me, I start to feel guilty. And then I feel guilty I can't remember. Then I feel guilty. Did I really do that? That was horrible. It's just,
Oh, yeah.
it's all over the place.
But just think how we all communicate, whether we're a child or an adult or a wife or, husband, inevitably we're going to say something that comes out wrong. Right. And I remember I'm sure she'll listen to it. My daughter, when my son was born and she was the first child, and we're at the hospital there, and we're all, celebrating his little birth there.
Aww.
And so we decided to give her a little gift, this little Holly Hobby, whatever Holly Hobby little bracelet thing or, but out of my mouth comes the phrase, "You're going to have to share the world with him now," or something like that.
Oh, come on, Dad. That's like the worst thing you could ever say. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Mouth opens, and out comes like a sentence that, she's been good about it, but it comes up every once in a while.
Well,
right?
you know what? When parents have a second child, it's not uncommon to feel guilty that you had that second child.
Wow.
Because now your attention in the world of that first child has to be shared with the other one. And I know many, many, many parents that felt that way when they had their second child.
Well, in my family, I'm the youngest of 5, and my oldest brother that he has like, at one point, I think he had like 5 or 6 baby books of him, right? Photo albums.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Mine has,
nothing.
Pictures of cats and buildings and the extra pictures that we got at the the photo studio that has an extra copy of something.
So there's no real baby book about you.
If there is, it's pretty thin. How's that sound? There's a handful of nice pictures and everything, but it wasn't multi albums like the encyclopedia set. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
it's just funny how that kind of happens. And my parents, I don't think they felt guilty about it. I didn't feel guilty about it, but it's interesting how you do run into those things that some people get all that. If you're the first child, you're definitely going to be the pride and joy till number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 show up.
Oh, right? 100%. And I also think that the feelings of guilt have a lot to do with your sensitivity. Some people are just more sensitive than others. And sometimes someone may not even be trying to guilt you, but because you're so sensitive to maybe off comments that aren't super positive, that might lead into, kind of a guilt type of feeling as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. One thing that I was going to bring up is that this thing called gaslighting. Did you ever hear of gaslighting before? I never heard of it till recently. I had to look it up.
I have heard of gaslighting, and it's like something in relationships.
Yeah, and I thought it had to do with just exaggerating something. But actually, the definition I came across was dealing with that it's when people make you think that you're like losing your mind. Isn't that funny? Yes. For like having a different opinion about it and say, oh, you'd be completely insane if you didn't help me out. You're this psychological crazy person if you're not going to help your family out. See what I'm saying?
Yes. So gaslighting is a very common trait of a narcissist. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I just knew that it was kind of a manipulation where somebody is trying to say, unless you think my way or believe in what I'm believing, it's like a put downs or something like that. It's really going one step beyond reality. It is kind of in a form of emotional abuse and those types of things. And I've seen that in relationships and people that, they manipulate each other. I'm sure you've seen that,
yes.
Right? And somehow a wife is supposed to clean the house a certain way. I remember this husband and wife we knew many, many years ago. Mm-hmm. And we go over to the house and I think she was from a different country too. And she literally scrubbed this house top to bottom.
Yeah.
And she was so proud that she had all of her husband's shirts in like a color-coded system from left to right. Oh, yeah. It was, and then the drawers, she had to show us the drawers where everything was like put in the drawers a certain way.
So have you ever seen the movie Sleeping with the Enemy with Julia Roberts?
Not the whole thing. I watched bits and pieces of movies.
That's exactly what that movie's about.
Oh my gosh. And so when you stop and think about, this whole guilt tripping, to me, that's a prime example. Why would she do that? Why would she spend hours a day, doing these things, she was told that was her role. She was going to feel not as a good wife or mother if she didn't do those things.
Yes. No, that's a very abusive type of relationship.
Yeah.
But
so, when
go ahead,
I wonder
Gary.
if there's like warning signs. Is there anything like that you can think of? I guess that was a warning sign. I remember seeing this lady go, you don't need a warning sign. You need to get away from this husband of yours.
No, in that case, you're just in an abusive relationship and you need a good family and a good friend to help you escape that. That situation is awful. Yeah. But sometimes the behavior is even easier to spot. So it can be a much more subtle and difficult thing to direct. So there are some key areas of guilt tripping. So one is making comments suggesting that you have not done as much work as they have done.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
right?
I worked so much harder than you have, yes.
Yeah, so you and your spouse come home from work. You both worked a hard day. You have little children that you both have to take care of. And you start to cook dinner and you got a child screaming and your spouse says, and you're looking at them for help and support and they say, you know what kind of day I had? Right? I worked all day. And the other person wants to say, me too. Right?
Wow.
It leads into a bad situation.
But, I don't know whether it's, and this kind of ties in there, whether people are intentional or unintentional in this thing. What do you think? Do you think everybody's like, they have ulterior motives, or do you think this is sometimes just their culture of growing up? I think if you're in a family where you're a man and you've always run your wife around the house getting stuff for you, you're probably going to do that to your wife, right?
Yeah, and in some of those cases, Gary, it might even be unintentional. They're doing it. Everyone around them recognizes it, but they don't have self-recognition of the problem.
Right. And, so it's interesting how that kind of ties in here because, I think you have to dig in there and say, where is this coming from? Is it coming because they're, I don't want to say the word stupid, but, is there coming because they don't know what they're doing, or is it they really are masters, like you said in that movie? That guy was a master of manipulation, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He was, had OCD. He had all kinds of possessive and abusive traits.
Yeah, that's just crazy. So when I was thinking about this too, I was thinking about, again, when we talk about common situations that happen, right? When we think about it, I would say, as you said before, I think it has a lot to do with your parents, your spouse, your friends, and your children. And your coworkers. Mm-hmm. You think those are probably the most common, and sometimes neighbors. I've had neighbors, kind of manipulate me for different things too.
Really,
whether it's to borrow something, or hey, we're having a party and you need to be there. Well, I don't need to be there. Do you see what I'm saying? But they just count the value of their party by the number of people that show up. Sometimes.
So let's talk about that unspoken guilt. So your neighbors are mowing their lawn twice a week. In a, kind of a, what is that, a horizontal type of fashion with the design. And they're pruning their rose bushes. They have a landscaper coming to do the mulching. And there you are, working 14 hours a day. It's a wonder if you can get out there once a week. But you feel guilty.
Yeah, when it comes to mowing grass, my family knows this. I said the number one goal is to get the grass shorter, right? That's the number one goal.
Oh, my gosh.
It's not to make number 2 and 3 is probably to make it look better, but get the grass shorter.
Okay, so you're not putting fancy designs in that grass.
But I've had neighbors like that. I had neighbors recently that because he's retired, he likes to mow his grass almost every day. Well, good for him, right?
Right,
It doesn't make me feel that I need to stand out there and, well, he's mowing it, I better get my mower out and be a champion over here too. It's
one of those situations would be your neighbor putting up Christmas lights. They got the most beautiful decorations, and then you notice, oh my gosh, there's another neighbor. Oh my, there's another one. Now you're the only house on the street that isn't as beautiful as the next. What do you do about that? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I don't think they intentionally are guilt tripping you, but I know that, we all did this, when are you going to, That's what you're saying. Everybody
Oh,
else is
yeah.
doing it. Why don't you do a type of thing? Yeah, that does happen. I mean, that happens. It happens with people buying cars. Happens with people buying clothes, don't they?
100%. Yeah.
Everyone looks a certain way or dresses a certain way, and here I am.
Oh,
schlumping.
yeah. And yes. And children are, they are recipients of that type of guilt all the time. If a child just can't, their parents are doing the best they can, they're not out buying them the designer clothes and the North Face jackets and the Ugg boots, and they're in a class where most of the kids are wearing clothes like that. That can make a child just feel awful.
Yeah, I just saw a program this morning, in fact, how the major clothing stores and malls have decided they finally got around to realizing we need bigger size clothes. Isn't that something they've never really went into the plus sizes and how much they've missed billions of dollars, millions and billions of dollars, probably millions of dollars, not targeting that. Well, now but part of that they tied in was how bad these kids feel not being able to wear those designer clothes over the years.
Yes.
And how, they're guilted into that, feeling bad and feeling like, if you were only, 100 pounds smaller, you'd fit into this.
Oh my gosh, that's awful. And that I think something like that hurts on 20 different levels, right? It affects you the rest of your life. You never forget what that was about, right? Those times when you're young, we can all think back when we were young and the things that hurt us most. Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree, though? Sometimes you just have to distance yourself. When you get into these situations, you just have to step back sometimes and evaluate, is this what I want to be spending my energy on, right? It takes a lot of energy to be dealing with these people.
Well, it does, yeah. But it's about, how do you do that? How do you just make yourself feel okay? Is it about having more self-confidence, or just teaching yourself to that better, feeling good about yourself internally, so you don't have to come up with a solution because you already just feel it in your heart? I don't know.
I know I had a secretary many years ago, or administrative assistant, and I remember one time waking up in the middle of the night and I said, no,
what?
Just the word no.
Okay.
I'm not, because it's bothering me at night. I felt guilty, like, I should be doing her job or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I finally, started just saying out loud, no. I don't think I said it to her. Oh, for goodness sakes.
Would you stand in front of the mirror and say that? Just to practice?
But when it would start messing with my head, I would verbally say, no, just no. That's not, I'm not going there. And, that seemed to work for me. And maybe if people find themselves on one of these adventures, the adventures and aging of the guilt trip,
right.
Maybe they need to just stop every once in a while and say, hey, I'm not going to do that,
Yes.
And just get in the right place mentally of how to deal with that.
So, Gary, there's also guilt that is so unintentional. So I know for myself, have you ever promised someone you would call them right back? I will call you. Yeah, I will. You know what? I'm busy. I'm so sorry. I want to talk to you. I'm going to call you right back. And then you wake up in the middle of the night and say, oh my gosh, I never called them back.
It's been weeks.
It's been weeks.
It's been years.
And then once you reach a certain point, it's like, oh, I can't do it now.
Oh, you feel silly calling them back now.
Oh my gosh. Or I'm famous for, I'll email that to you. Someone will ask me for something now.
Yeah, well, I'm starting not to believe when people say that to me, that you're going to send it right away.
And then I don't.
That's not going to happen. But one of the things that I did find in all of this was the fact that, one of the areas that you can find out if you're being manipulated, I guess, is that when people, through their body language, if that makes sense,
yes.
The tone of their voice, their facial expressions, the disapproval that people's bodies can convey to each other, right?
Yes.
And it's no longer a conversation of saying, hey, my car broke down, can you help me out? It's more like, they're saying, your car is my car, your stuff is my stuff, your time is now my time,
What?
And they come across with that body language of saying that you owe them. You owe them. Like the guy with the pizza in college.
Yeah.
I still owe him.
No, you're still paying for that one.
There's no way to get. What's interesting though, I remember there was some nursing home owners. This was years ago, and first time I met them, they took me out to dinner. I think it was, and they bought me this wonderful dinner.
Yeah.
And then something else, and I said, I'm starting to feel indebted to you. And they said, yeah, that's what we're doing to you. They were pretty honest about this.
Oh, right? Wow.
But it was
it's how like brainwashing.
But how they would use that to their advantage, I guess, in different situations of getting people to do what they wanted them to do by getting you indebted to them. So they weren't mafia or gangsters,
right?
But they came across like it.
So you know what, Gary? I think there are actually books written for management and leaders to know how to do that, to get their subordinates to work in the way in which they want them to.
Oh yeah,
it's happening all the time.
Yeah, and there's different types of guilt trips. I know there's one that's manipulation, right? That's getting someone to do something they normally wouldn't do, right?
Yes,
that's a form of a guilt trip. There's conflict avoidance, and I think sometimes people avoid dealing with a situation in their life by trying to pawn it off on you to solve it, right?
Oh, for sure. And then what about moral education? Those guilt trips that can be a way of getting someone to engage in a behavior that the individual feels is moral or right. And and so you have to engage because, oh my goodness, if you don't, you're immoral. Oh yeah,
you're on the wrong side.
You're on the wrong side.
Think about all the things with politics the last couple of years.
Yes,
people have felt guilty. I think on all sides, saying oh, you have to think the way I'm thinking, or you're not a good person.
Right.
Or, even with the COVID stuff, take the shot, not take the shot, people are guilted into that one way or the other. And sometimes that does backfire. But I think that when it comes to, again, we've said a few times, feeling guilty is not bad. It's how you convey it to other people that make it their problem. That's the bad way of
that's the bad way. Right. Other. Right.
And, it does damage relationships. I'm sure that, that guy that I owed him a pizza, I don't need to see him again, right?
No, you'll never see him again. But Gary, to this day, that guy bothers you. It worked.
Yeah, he's probably going to hunt me down someday because of this podcast and want me to pay for his pizza again.
No, he's listening and he's gonna reach out to you.
Isn't that something? And again, as we said before, that sometimes people behave the opposite of how you want them, to do. But a couple of the solutions I think that come to mind deal with, acknowledging people. I think sharing your own feelings and setting boundaries. I think that boundaries is a great suggestion to any of our listeners that are dealing with trying to get through this, of saying, I don't mind watching your kids, but I can't watch them all the time. I don't mind helping you out with giving you a ride to work, but I don't know if I can do that every day of the week. Right?
Yeah, even speaking those truths can be very hard for some. That's how people get involved in situations that they don't know how to get out of. Sometimes that's hard to do. Yeah, well, Gary, we are coming to a close. What's your final thoughts on this?
I think that when it comes to adventures in aging, the reason we bring this up is obviously you're dealing with young people, middle-aged people, older people, and relationships, as we said. It's sometimes, and we don't want our listeners to ever feel guilty for something they shouldn't feel guilty about. And how there are solutions and there's help and there's people, but being honest and just kind of rolling with it, I think, you just don't, time goes away, that one situation, as I said, becomes years. People find themselves in these relationships over years, and we want to, support people and really encourage them to think about these types of topics and find a way to have the highest quality of life possible.
And know that if anything happened to your life like it did with Gary, years and years ago, when he was guilted into something and still to this day cannot get over it, just know that bothers nobody else in the world but you. It is making an impact on no one else. That person has long forgot about it, whatever it was they did to you.
But I'm going to eat a pizza tonight. Right?
Yeah, I think you need to. Well, everyone, this has been fun. Thank you so much for joining Gary and I today. Please share our podcast, like and subscribe to us. We appreciate all of you. Thank you.